Supporting autistic employees and colleagues is brought to you by Aetna and the Kentucky Autism Training Center. I'm Bev Harp from the University of Kentucky's Human Development Institute. I'll be talking about one of our projects, Innovative Supports for Autistic Workers, and ways both employers and supporters can create more equitable workplaces for autistic employees. All training is written and conducted by autistic staff. We take an individualized approach, not only to the person with a disability, but for businesses as well. We will customize trainings to fit the needs of any employer. Just provide us with the questions you would like answered and let us know if you'd like a Zoom or an in-person training or a recording to share with supervisory staff. ISAW is a training and consultation project primarily serving employers. We also provide training for employment specialists, OBR staff, direct support workers, and more. We consult with businesses to ensure that they have the accurate information they need to provide accommodations and the skills they need to supervise and retain autistic workers. We offer site visits to increase understanding of accessibility needs. We do offer some supports for job seekers as well as autistic people who are employed but may be struggling or at risk of losing their jobs. Additionally, we provide downloadable resources such as infographics and fact sheets at our website, isaw.hdiuk.org. Our latest initiative is a fully online training course, Autism Informed Employers. This HDI learning course is about 3.5 hours long and can be taken at the employer's own convenience. We have modules on understanding autism, interviewing, accessibility, supported employment, and much more. The online training features scenarios for practice and multiple suggestions for supports. If you're watching this training, you are most likely aware that autism is a disability that features communication differences, as well as differences in social needs and security needs, or the need for sameness and repetition. It is important to understand that autism is not just the co-occurrence of these qualities, that it is not a checklist of behaviors to be remediated, but a syndrome of differences resulting from observable differences in the brain. Brain scans show many differences between autistic and typical brains. For example, the corpus callosum is a bundle of fibers separating the left and right hemispheres of the brain. In autistic people, the corpus callosum tends to be considerably thinner than average. Differences in the hippocampus have been observed as well, and these may account for some of the memory differences we see in autistic people. Scans of autistic children's brains have also showed a larger amygdala. This is important as it's where our fight, flight, freeze responses are generated. This spectrum cartoon features Earl responding to an interviewer's question about their strengths. "Well, I don't mean to brag," Earl responds, "but my amygdala is huge." Researchers have observed that autistic people consistently experience physical discomfort and anxiety as a result of sensory issues. This is important to keep in mind as we think about the stresses autistic people encounter in navigating a world not designed for us. Perhaps the most significant brain difference to be aware of is hyperconnectivity. In early childhood, and to a lesser extent continuing, our brains are constantly adding and deleting neural connections. As the brain figures out what it will be used for most, it strengthens those areas, while pathways that are not being used are removed. This is what happens in the typical brain. Autistic brains do far less of this pruning, so we are left with many more connectors than neurotypical people have. Research suggests that hyperconnectivity plays a strong role in the sensory perceptions and cognition of autistic people. Autistic brains have qualities that are different from neurotypical brains. Some of these are perceived as negative by society, and some as positive. In the workplace, challenges related to core autism traits may need to be addressed through accommodations. Most challenges fall into the categories of sensory needs, social needs, communication, executive functioning, and hidden rules. Hidden rules are those workplace customs or understandings that employees are expected to pick up easily without direct instruction. For example, is this an office where it's okay to reheat fish in the microwave? If I have a question for my supervisor, should I send it immediately or compile all questions and save till the end of the day? Is it okay to always be 10 minutes late like I was at my last job? Or is that going to be a problem here? The accommodations most often requested by autistic workers include a quiet workspace, lighting alternatives other than fluorescent or super bright lights, detailed work lists, text-based communication, schedule adjustments or flex time, working from home, being excused from some meetings, support with organizational tasks, reminders, and sometimes job customization options. Autistic employees report that they have unmet needs in the workplace, mostly in the areas of social differences and hidden rules. Formal accommodations are based on the rights outlined in the Americans with Disabilities Act. Each workplace has a process for requesting accommodations. Most require a letter from a healthcare professional to be provided to Human Resources. If requested for the documented disability, accommodations must be provided. However, they do not have to be exactly what the employee has asked for. Ideally, there is a process of negotiation, but the employer will make the final decision about what the accommodations will be. In some smaller businesses or agencies, an employee can sometimes work out some of their accommodations needs with a direct supervisor. Coworkers can be empowered to act as natural supports in companies with more flexible culture. I've talked a little bit about sensory supports already, as far as the quiet environment and non-fluorescent lighting, but to provide a bit more detail. Many autistic workers benefit from having a variety of seating options, adequate personal space, and the ability to move freely as needed. Some may also need a scent-free area, a workspace free of distracting visual elements, or adjustment to uniform policies. Executive functioning supports are no less important. Autistic workers respond to clear and detailed instructions delivered in the employee's best mode of communication, whether that is by speech, email, or a weekly written work list. Deadlines should be clear. Flexibility is appreciated, but projects with open-ended deadlines are likely to be delayed indefinitely. Autistic workers generally do best when given as much information as possible, including the reasons behind a request or process. Understanding the reasons makes the task easier to remember and to prioritize. An autistic employee or one who has ADHD may need reminders. Calendar apps are not a great resource unless someone is available and willing to assist with the setup. If a person having consistent difficulty in meeting deadlines, they are likely to also have difficulty setting up or remembering to use the app. Regular check-ins with supervisors are a must for most autistic workers. These should include direct and honest feedback and should be scheduled in advance. Here's an example of how a supervisor might address a problem with an employee. Trevor is a graphic designer with communication and sensory differences who also struggles with anxiety. He attends weekly meetings at his advertising firm, but is unable to actively participate. As an accommodation, Trevor is authorized to attend these meetings virtually, and inclusive strategies are implemented. These strategies could include the use and careful monitoring of a chat box as an alternative to speech, plain language documents, pausing between topics or statements, providing an agenda 48 hours in advance, and a group understanding of autistic communication differences. Above all, autistic workers need good autism-informed policies, practices, and people. Autism-friendly policies might include flexible hours, remote work hours, and paid mental health or self-care days, in addition to traditional sick leave. Some practices, such as the use of clear and direct language, mentoring for new hires, and timely specific feedback, can be very helpful. One place where autistic and neurotypical workers tend to agree is on the primary importance of people around us. Autistic workers need supervisors and coworkers who understand autism, value inclusion, and appreciate diversity. Let's take a look at some communication needs, styles, and abilities seen in autistic people. This illustration by Brittany Granville references the idea that autistic people are likely to misunderstand figures of speech. A manager is saying to another employee, "Let's face it, that project is dead in the water." The autistic employee watching is imagining a document with crossed-out eyes floating in a body of water. While it's true that some autistic people will struggle with metaphors like this, we are far more likely to be confused by figures of speech that are simply insincere, such as, "I'll see you later," or "Let's get together, I'll call you soon." In general, autistic people respond well to communications that are clear, concise, and consistent. If the statements can also be made logical or meaningful, better still. Delivering your message in a way that respects the worker is also important. Keep in mind that this is a person who has faced a lot of disrespect. Simple courtesy and giving the benefit of the doubt can go a long way. Many of us struggle with chit-chat and rote greetings like, "How are you today?" To better include an autistic client, employee, or colleague in your daily routines, try engaging around a topic that is important or meaningful to the person. Here, a neurotypical colleague gets no response when asking about the weather. He changes his approach to comment on the autistic coworker's SpongeBob t-shirt and receives an enthusiastic response. Too often, autistic people are accused or suspected of faking at times when communication resources are low. Autism is a dynamic disability. This means that abilities can fluctuate over long and short periods of time, and that even if Joe spoke very well yesterday, he may be unable to put words together today. This should be easy to understand if you think about how well you can perform a task when well rested and free of stress, versus on the worst day of your life. Remember that the autistic person's energy is more easily depleted. Everything from understanding instructions to ordering lunch to making a phone call require extra steps. Many processes that are done on an unconscious level by typical brains have to be done consciously. One well-known communication style of autistic people is echolalia. Immediate echolalia describes words or phrases repeated back to another speaker. Delayed echolalia is the practice of repeating words or phrases from TV, movies, books, songs, or other media, or from earlier conversations. Echolalia is natural and should not be discouraged or ignored. It is real communication. If you're having trouble understanding how the words being said are relevant, consider that they might be relevant to the speaker's mental state. In some cases, echolalia is used more as a placeholder, meaning something like, "Yes, I know you are talking to me, and I do want to engage with you, but I don't have access to generative speech right now." Think of echolalia as a request for connection and proceed accordingly, with the understanding that it is the best way they have of saying it right now. Of course, they may just be repeating favorite words that are fun to say. In this case, echolalia should be thought of as a stem or an action meant to help focus or calm the nervous system. STEM stands for stimulatory behavior. Sometimes it might seem that an autistic person wants to share with you every thought they've ever had on a favorite topic. This is a false impression. They actually know far more about this topic than they can share in a single conversation. If you could find more time, you can hear the next chapter. Congratulations, you are now a recipient of autistic info dumping. One of my favorite pop culture examples was in a TV show called The Middle. Young Brick wanted nothing for his birthday but for his family to listen to his lecture on fonts. The joy he experienced resonated with autistic viewers. If you are sincere in wanting to know an autistic person, take advantage of these learning opportunities. And before you tell someone that's not appropriate to talk about at work, or you're wasting time, ask yourself if they are taking up more time than other employees who may be chatting about sports or family or gossip. The thoughts of autistic people are just as important. These conversations are highways we have lovingly constructed to enable you to come closer. And now we come to the difficult question of blunt language. Why must we be so cruel as to say exactly what we mean? In this Spectrum cartoon, Earl has shared a thought with their work team. The words have turned to fire and scorched everyone as they come out. What was Earl trying to say? Maybe something like, "Your conclusion is incorrect," or "The product is inadequate." Notice that most of these statements are not mean or personally insulting. They are considered wrong simply because they don't feature enough padding. The ways we're expected to say it is more like, I really like this idea overall. There seems to be a small problem in this one area, and I'm wondering if it might be possible to make a couple of changes, to make it more user-friendly. What do you think? Wherever there are autistic and non-autistic people working together, you will find this issue. That's because we have different communication priorities based on our neurology. All of us, autistic, allistic, neurotypical, benefit from two things in communication. We share facts and information, but we also share tokens of respect, friendship, and recognition of our place in whatever system we are working within, be it the family, workplace, or larger community. At work especially, understanding and being understood are vital. For most people, the first need is met automatically because most of the time they will be talking to people with brains set up much like their own. There is little fear of being misunderstood or misunderstanding someone in a basic exchange of information if you are neurotypical. This is not true for the autistic person, who must work very hard to understand and be understood by the majority. Think of this as something similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When your first need is met, to understand the exchange, you are able to move on, and the priority now becomes that transmission of subtle signals that indicate the proper level of respect each party is believed to owe the other. This is where autistic people fail by neurotypical standards. We are not able to meet this need for you. Please understand that non-autistic people are equally bad at meeting our communication needs. To respect an autistic person in conversation means making your statements clear and direct. It is not a gift to be told that you are mostly doing okay, only to lose your job a month later because you didn't understand that the part that wasn't covered by that mostly was what you were meant to focus on. So before asking an autistic person to be kind or respectful, consider whether you might be using an expecting use of euphemisms, understatement of problems, and confusing tangents of insincere praise. That language is simply not accessible to all of us. None of this means that you are expected to accept actual rudeness, but it does mean reconsidering your definition of what is rude versus what is honest and direct. You are entitled to your own boundaries. Most autistic people will try to respect these if you can state them clearly, give good reasons, and are consistent in respecting the boundaries of others. You may need to say something like, "Name calling, like that word you just used, is unacceptable. I will not respond to it. Call me Susan or Mrs. Smith." Or you may find that you need to specify, "When I'm talking to someone else and you walk up to speak to me, I need you to wait until I have finished what I'm saying. I will let you know that I see you waiting by nodding or saying, 'I'll be with you in a minute.'" It's true that autistic people may sometimes say things that you would rather not hear, but keep in mind the kinds of things that we hear every day. Our characteristics being referred to as symptoms, being called special, or having someone claim that our minds are a different age from the rest of us, or that someone who might be autistic is at risk. It's hard for us to remember that these words are not meant to hurt us than it is for the people who use this language to remember that they do hurt nevertheless. As many as 40% of autistic people may be non-speakers. Here are a few things you need to know. Autistic people who don't speak do generally understand what you are saying. Every person has something to express, whether they use spoken words, written words, or other kinds of symbols, or whether their communication consists mostly of gestures and pointing. There are many ways people communicate other than talking. The non-speaking autistic person may or may not have an intellectual disability. You cannot assume that they do or that they don't based on their inability to speak. You should speak in a normal tone of voice and at a normal volume. Address the person directly, even if they have a support worker. There is no good reason to exclude a non-speaking person from activities simply because they don't talk. Be sure the communication methods you use are ones that they can understand. Next, I'm going to talk about some of the ways that a peer can include and support autistic colleagues by practicing allyship. Allyship is active support for a marginalized group of which you are not a member. Sometimes the word allyship is used to describe a relationship to one or a few individuals. We can think of this as micro-allyship, and is particularly useful in the workplace. There are many ways of providing natural support or being an ally at work. For example, you might heat up lunch for a quadriplegic coworker or make a phone call for an autistic colleague who is having trouble accessing speech. Allies notice when accommodations are needed and not provided, or when a document has ableist language, or a logo with images that are opposed by disabled communities. Macro-allyship, or what we usually just call allyship, happens when a person wishing to be an ally listens to the needs and preferences of the marginalized community and takes action. Storm is an autistic self-advocate who opposes the use of puzzle piece symbols for autism. Elizabeth is a neurotypical social worker who follows the lead of Storm and other advocates. She changes the logo on her business card. She shares what she has learned with other professionals. She attends a protest with Storm to promote respect for autistic people. There are only a few simple things you need to do to become an ally. The first and most important is to listen. Respect autistic people as experts on autism, not just the ones who have a degree and not just the ones you think are nice or civil or reasonable. It takes a lot of contact with autistic people before you start to understand. The second thing you will want to do is to support the stated goals of self-advocates. This might not always be easy, as you might have to set aside some of your own priorities. Fortunately, you are not required to be an ally. It's entirely voluntary. If you do want to be an ally, though, you will want to follow not only the goals but the strategies proposed by self-advocates. For example, you may agree with self-advocates that a policy needs to be changed, but would prefer that they take a gentler approach, like a letter-writing campaign, rather than protesting outside the courthouse. You don't have to participate in every action, but as an ally, you would not suggest changing strategies. When sharing ideas or information about autism, an ally chooses articles or books written by autistic people. It might be tempting to show how much you know by writing your own analysis. There's nothing wrong with that. But it isn't allyship. Do share what you have learned with your professional colleagues and peers. An ally will speak up and redirect others as needed. Colleagues who are allies will also do these things. Understand people with disabilities as a marginalized group. Practice the 5 keys to allyship. Understand communication differences. Educate peers and employers. Call out harmful representation. assist with tasks when asked, and recognize and avoid microaggressions. Allies are the people we can count on to speak up for us when we're not in the room. This can be uncomfortable at work. People may think that you're taking the wrong position or that you're too controlling. Some things that are not allyship include talking about the person when they aren't present, or revealing a disability status if the person hasn't shared it and you don't have permission. Allies don't take action on their own, but work alongside self-advocates. Performative allyship is more about the things you do to look good. Remember, if it centers you, it's not allyship. Now let's take a look at a few examples of how this might look at work. Peter's company is moving to a new space. Since this space has fewer offices available than the old building, some workers who had private offices before will now have to share. Jan is Peter's supervisor and will be assigned one of the few non-shared offices. She lobbies with management for Peter to have the private office, even offering to trade with him because she knows it will affect him more negatively. You don't really have to go that far above and beyond to be considered an ally, but it is definitely a kind thing that she did. Here's another example. Steffi is autistic and has worked at a large retailer for about a year and a half. She's a hard worker and liked by management, but her colleagues avoid her. A new employee, Martina, notices that Steffi is not only isolated socially, but coworkers don't pitch in to help her when she is overwhelmed, as they often do for each other. The next time Steffi is struggling, Martina steps in to help. As they get to know each other, Martina learns that Steffi frequently violates hidden rules of the workplace. For example, she was the one who put that fish in the microwave. Martina points out some of the reasons why coworkers might believe Steffi is being thoughtless or disrespectful to others. Steffi can decide for herself if she wants to do things differently or not. Because Martina is already liked by the other staff, she's able to influence their actions towards Steffi, and they are no longer able to exclude her. For example, Martina begins sitting with Steffi at lunch, and her friends follow. Scott is an autistic man working at an auto dealership. He cleans cars up for sale once they're traded in. His coworkers always manage to grab the best cars, leaving him to work on used trade-ins that have been trashed. Luann notices that Scott is doing more work for less pay than the others and brings this up with the manager, saying that Scott should be paid more or that there should be a fair way of dividing up the work. The manager responds that Scott gets the older trade-ins because he has an interest in vintage cars. At this point, Luann insists that Scott should be included in this conversation, and the manager backs down and implements a fairer system. Our next example focuses on centering autistic voices. A business is planning an autism training for its employees. They have hired a non-autistic psychologist and a neurotypical behaviorist to conduct the training. An ally speaks up. We really need to cancel this and hire an autistic trainer. If you need help finding someone with experience, I can point you in the right direction. As we have seen, allyship is not easy or without its risks. If you choose to accept this mission to become an ally, you will be stepping outside of your comfort zone to confront structural ableism alongside self-advocates. Thinking about workplace relationships in terms of allyship is one strategy for inclusion, but not the only one. Mentoring is a fantastic opportunity to welcome new employees and can be especially useful for autistic workers. A mentor should be someone who isn't the person's supervisor. The mentor is someone who can respond to questions openly and without judgment. The employee should never have to worry that the mentor is relaying their questions to the boss unless asked to do so. Some things mentors can do to be helpful include introducing the new person to coworkers. These introductions might need to be at a slower pace for autistic employees who could be overwhelmed with meeting too many people at once. Mentors can be very helpful with understanding the hidden rules and helping autistic workers understand the social habits and expectations around the workplace. In addition to easing the way socially, the mentor can assist with some training, such as where to find forms and how to use the new copier. A good mentor offers positive and constructive feedback. People who make good mentors are actively interested in diversity and inclusion and are willing to learn about autism. The mentor needs to have a fair amount of experience in the workplace and be comfortable with teaching a variety of tasks. It is important that they have good relationships with peers and management. Other employees will then be more likely to include the mentee in conversations. Of course, to mentor an autistic worker, it is best to have a thick skin and not take offense at blunt comments. But it's also important that they are able to honestly respond to the autistic employee if they have made a mistake that is likely to affect their employment. Finally, mentoring is a calling. It is not appropriate to involve someone in a mentoring program who does not wish to do it. Every new employee deserves a warm and sincere welcome. Finally, I would like to mention a third way of approaching inclusion. This is something that we talk a lot about at the Human Development Institute, and we believe that the world needs more universal design. While most businesses do a good job of providing accessibility for physical disabilities, cognitive and sensory disabilities are often overlooked. Universal design means thinking of disability and other differences from the very start. Whether you are designing a building or a policy handbook, workplaces that provide low-effort, flexible, intuitive, and equitable ways of getting things done will have far fewer requests for accommodations because the space has been organized with everyone in mind. For further reading, here are the references used in putting this presentation together. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this training. Innovative Supports for Autistic Workers is a project of UK's Human Development Institute and is funded by Kentucky's Office of Vocational Rehabilitation and the Kentucky Office of Autism. If you would like to learn more about supporting autistic employees, please contact us at ISAW, BAHARP2 at uky.edu, or visit our website, isaw.hdiouk.org.